Welcome to this second video on the use of articles. In the first video we looked at this framework and we looked at the difference between countable and uncountable words, and we took a look at the difference between indefinite and definite. And that way we figured out when to use articles in English. But we promised you to give you more specific input to find out when a case is definite or indefinite. So, indefinite, let's look at some possibilities. For a countable singular word, you can say a car, and then you talk about any car. It's not defined yet. For instance, I can say, I bought a car. The only thing the other person knows is that, well, out of all the cars on the world, on the planet, you bought one, but that's not definite yet. I do not yet know what specific car that is. I can talk, for instance, about cars in plural. I like cars. Well, you don't know what car specifically and not defined, it's just in general. And that same thing again applies for uncountable words, words like music. I like music, that is any music, it's not defined. Or even if it's slightly more restricted by putting a word in front of the word, for instance, putting funk in front of music. Funk music in itself is an abstract category, but what specific funk music, I do not yet know. So, indefinite things would be a car, cars, music, or funk music, as we remember from this framework that we had for indefinite things. Here, a or nothing are the options that we have. Moving now to definite things. Definite things are defined. You and I, in a conversation, we both know what we're talking about. I could be talking about the car of my father, and you'd know what car it is. It's not any other car, no, it's the car of my father. We're talking about the cars outside, not the cars that are parked inside or in the next street. No, the cars outside. They've become definite. I love the funk music of the 1980s. Any kind of funk music? No, the 1980s. It is defined. So, answering the question, when is something definite? Here we already have a first clue. When we look at these three sentences, or parts of sentences, you can see that there is a defining element that is going to follow the central word. The car of my father. The cars outside. The funk music of the 1980s. If an element follows that's going to define these nouns, we're going to use the, because it has become definite. Another case for looking at definite things is when in a certain context there's only one such thing. When we talk about the French Revolution, everybody immediately thinks 1789. Of course, we know that the French tend to revolutionize a lot, and they had a couple, but the French Revolution, everybody knows, 1789. The sun, within the context of our solar system, we only have one, so I can immediately talk about the sun, and you and I both know what we're talking about. The Prime Minister. In all countries, apart from Belgium, there's only one Prime Minister, so when I say the Prime Minister, we all know what we're talking about. There's only one such thing that exists in a certain context. Third case when something becomes definite is when we already mentioned it before in the context. I could say, well, I met a girl the other night. The girl was wearing etc, etc, etc. So the first time that I mention her, it is still well, it's a girl, it's indefinite. But the second time I can say the girl was wearing, and you know, well, the person I'm talking to will know that I'm talking about the girl that I just introduced. Then there's a thing called generic use. It means that you talk about an entire category or about an element from a category. For instance, you can say, tigers are dangerous, and you talk about all tigers. A tiger is dangerous, and you just talk about any single tiger, or the tiger is dangerous, and then you do not talk about one specific element, one specific item that you have in mind, but you talk about all tigers. The tiger is dangerous. So these are some specific examples that are specifically used to talk about the entire category. Final things to mind then, British agriculture versus the agriculture of Britain. And we use a cup of tea with the post modifier of tea when we indicate a quantity and not use the.